Sure, thanks a lot. Matthew Lee, Inner City Press, on behalf of the Free UN Coalition for Access. Thanks a lot for the briefing. Your first example were these 89 South Sudanese boys that were kidnapped. And I guess I wanted to ask you, because the UN was a little slow in reporting on it, and now it appears that they were basically kidnapped or taken by a unit that's associated with the South Sudan Army. That there's a General Olony that's been summoned to answer on it. So I wanted to know, they're obviously, it's not a terrorist group. It's not Boko Haram. It seems to be a group that's part of an entity with which the UN, speaks. Do you think the UN has done enough in that case? And what's your understanding of the status of getting them released? And could the peacekeeping, missions in South Sudan or DRC and CAR do more to actually get child soldiers released and to ensure that education?
I appreciate what you're saying. These children apparently, from all reports we have, were seized by a warlord, and the relationship between him and the authorities and the other groups in South Sudanese is what you're speculating about. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know they were seized by a warlord. They were seized during the examinations that were taking inside the school precinct. So these 89 children are part of a new pattern of actually invading schools in this way. But in total, about 12,000 children in South Sudan have been abducted in recent times by different factions who are fighting a war and who are training these children who have been abducted as soldiers for the future. The children who were abducted from the school are only 12 to 15 years old. I said they were sitting exams. The latest information is that the terrorist group have offered to allow them to sit their exams as long as they can then take them back as child soldiers in the future. So we're dealing with a cynical, hypocritical group of people who are using these children as weapons of war. We now have 400,000 children in South Sudan who have been displaced and forced out of education. So we've got a crisis in education in South Sudan. I visited South Sudan some time ago, and then it was bad enough before the outbreak of the latest stage of the civil war. And I think we've got to recognize this, and this is why I've come to you today, that when these children were kidnapped in South Sudan, it got very little coverage in the international media. It is almost as if we've accepted that this tactic of kidnapping and abducting children from the school is something that is commonplace. And when last year the girls were abducted from Nigeria, there was a huge amount of both worry and publicity for it. This year, we're in a situation where we mustn't become accustomed to the fact that this is a practice that we can do nothing about. The whole world should be protesting, as we did over Chibok, about any child that is abducted from within the school and any child that has been kidnapped and taken into captivity, as is happening to so many children in South Sudan. Again, there's a campaign being launched in South Sudan that I've been talking to UNICEF and others about, and that is to get our children back to school. It is an attempt to persuade children and parents that they can go back to school safely, and work is being done to make the schools a lot safer. And upon that, of course, the Safe Schools initiative that has become, sadly, a necessary feature of how we plan for education for the future. Having safer schools is very much part of that, and I'm talking to people in South Sudan about how we can popularize this. The sooner the world comes to recognize that children's rights are being violated in a way that has not happened in previous years to the same extent, that we have been far too complacent as we've had a year when the violation of the rights of children has become a commonplace. And we must do something about this by raising both the profile of the international community's response to this, but these initiatives, making our schools safer, a humanitarian fund for education in emergencies, new guidelines that prevent the militarization of schools and treat them like hospitals. Now, these are the ways forward. And really, it's sad that 70 years after the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we're having to come to a conference in New York today to talk about the basic rights of children whose rights have been neglected for too long.